All right, thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to our board meeting on this June 27th, 2023. I'd like to welcome the people of our community, our stakeholders, our staff, and our board members. At this time, I'd like to take a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Board of Directors. Thank you, Chairman. Director Emister? Here. Director Odell? Not present. Director Stone?
Present.
Director Lockett?
Present.
Director Adams?
Present.
Director Robinson? Not present. Director Leggett? Not present. Director Taylor?
Present.
And Chairman Cody.
Present.
Chairman, you have a quorum for today's meeting.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, and Director Robinson is present. She just acknowledged in the chat. Thank you, Director Robinson.
At this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to our CEO for an introduction.
Yes, appreciate that, Chairman. As you all remember, part of our SMART grant that was awarded this year was our commitment with Savannah State, our HBCU, to a compensated internship with a member of the Computer Science Engineering Technology program. She has joined us today, and I'd like to give her a moment to introduce herself. We are so proud of this partnership and proud to have her join our team.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Padma Shukruge. I am a Savannah State University student majoring in computer science technology. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to CAT for providing me with this great internship opportunity. I'm highly excited to proceed with the internship. It is a great pleasure meeting you all. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. Today, I'd like to get a first and a second approval for today's agenda.
So moved.
Beverly, can you get it?
Director Emister? Yes. Director Odell? Not present. For the vote, Director Stone?
Yes.
Start over, I'm sorry. Director Emister? Yes. Director Odell? Not present for the vote. Director Stone?
Yes.
Director Lockett?
Yes.
Director Adams? Yes. Director Robinson?
Yes.
Director Leggett?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
And Chairman Cody.
Yes.
Chairman, motion passed
All right,
for
thank
the
you.
approval of today's agenda.
All right. Now, we'll be moving into our public hearing section of the agenda. I'm Dedrick Cody, the chairman of CAT Board of Directors. I come to you today to share CAT's ongoing commitment to fiscal responsibility and to review the proposed fiscal year 2024 operating and capital budget. Due to safety protocols, limited seating, and the well-being of our community, this budget hearing is being conducted as a hybrid meeting, allowing the opportunity for in-person and virtual comments from the public. Before the CAT Board of Directors move forward in making the final decision on the adoption of the proposed budget next month, we will consider comments received today, along with comments made by email or voicemail. Individuals wishing to provide written comments during the hearing may post your comments using the option of the Zoom chat box or by emailing your comments to meeting@catchacat.org or by U.S. mail to CAT at 900 East Gwinnett Street. Attention to Board of Directors. Persons desiring to provide oral comments about the proposed operating and capital budget may speak during the meeting once the phone and Zoom line is open for public comments. Physical copies of the proposed budgets are available for review. You may also view the proposed budget by visiting our website at catchacat.org under the transparency page. At this time, I'd like to recognize CEO Fady Massimo and CFO Stephanie Cutter to present the second reading of the proposed fiscal year 2024 operating and capital budget. Mr. Massimo.
Thank you, sir. I think we are still awaiting Ms. Cutter to arrive. But again, this is as the chairman has stated, this is a budget that has had an enormous amount of input from you all as the board of directors in listening to the community and the desires of the community as we move CAT forward. This is one of the most important tools that we have, and as the chairman stated, it is the one that demonstrates our fiscal responsibility, our commitment to community, and our path for moving CAT forward. So thank you all for being here today, and we will happy to receive comments on the budget.
Chairman, if I may, can we take a motion to enter into the public hearing?
Yes.
And Mr. Massimo, Ms. Cutter was having some issues with the printers theirs, both printers, so that may be the cause of this
I'll
delay.
make the motion and we enter into a public hearing.
I second.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Now do a roll call vote. Director Emerson? Yes. Director Odell?
Yes.
Director Stone?
Yes.
Director Lockett?
Yes.
Director Adams?
Yes.
Director Robinson?
Yes.
Director Leggett?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
And Chairman Cody?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Motion passed to enter into to open the floor for public hearing.
Before we unmute the callers and open up the floor for public comment, I ask that if you do have a comment related to the proposed budget, to please self-mute your phone lines and microphones so that we can engage respectfully with our speakers. If you are speaking, please make sure you turn off all TVs, radios to eliminate any background noise that will interfere with the full board hearing. State your name, and we will ask you to limit your comments to 2 minutes. Beverly, do we have any comments at this time?
Chairman, yes, sir, we do.
Good morning. I'm Sherry Dean, and I'm Vice President of Direct Services and Impact for United Way of the Coastal Empire. And I am so happy. Thank you so much for allowing us to come and provide comment on Chatham Area Transit, the budget. We truly believe and we appreciate being a part of the process and the stakeholder meetings. And as a provider of information and sources of services and referrals in the community, you know, United Way is a community stakeholder and has a vested interest in all the strategies that you all will be discussing today. We are in support of the fiscal year 2024 Chatham Area Transit budget, and particularly funding allocated towards the implementation of the Master Transit Plan, because it aligns directly with our mission to improve lives and our strategic plan to provide a safety net to the community while supporting their journey towards upward mobility, especially for those assessing employment opportunities that provide a living wage. So we see this as very important. And CAT is our community's public transportation leader. And adoption of the proposed budget is crucial to improve the existing infrastructure to meet community transportation needs that we partner with in our community, and to reinforce CAT's promise to our community, which I believe is to provide expansive and equitable transportation and improve the experience for everyone that rely on Chatham Area Transit. So thank you so much. Though that ends my comments, and I'm happy to provide any other comments or answer questions.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Ann Roberts. I serve as the Executive Director of Coastal Georgia Indicators Coalition. We are the organization that houses the Chatham Community Blueprint, which transportation is a big part of how we move forward and increase the well-being of our community and provide economic mobility. That said, I also serve as an evaluator on the CDC REACH grant that stands for Racial and Ethnic Approaches to Community Health. And through the work that we're doing through the CDC grant, we interview stakeholders within priority neighborhoods to understand the barriers that they have to improving their health. And one of those barriers is the how they get to everyday essentials that they need. And we have found that through these conversations, members of the priority neighborhoods speak to the fact that transit is always one, if not the top factor for accessing their everyday essentials, which include food. And so I am speaking on behalf of Coastal Georgia Indicators in full support of the 2024 CAP budget, and in particular, the funding allocated toward the implementation of the master transit plan. This is a step forward for our community. We know that nothing stays static, right? We're going to be growing in the coming years. And we know that this is a good step forward to meet people where they are and provide the transportation that they need. So we are in full support of increasing access to jobs and services. I'm excited about the introduction of the micro transit, which will enhance access to job centers and increase transit. And of course, the enhancements to our fixed route services, particularly the reliability of those, and the bus stop improvements, ensuring people have safe and comfortable places to be. Thank you.
And Chairman Cody, we have one written comment. I'm not sure if Ms. Paula Cressa is on the line. If not, I will read her written comment for the record.
Yes.
Okay. Dear Chairman Cody and CAT Board of Directors, we are writing to support the fiscal year 2024 proposed CAT budget, particularly as it relates to the implementation of the Master Transit Plan recommendations. As a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee that participated in the development of the Master Transit Plan, I am excited about the recommendations that will strengthen Chatham area transit to meet with our communities involving transportation needs. Healthy Savannah is a longtime advocate and champion of equitable public policy that improves public health, particularly while meeting the needs of the most vulnerable and traditionally underserved members of our community. New services such as microtransit will greatly enhance access to jobs and services, while improvements to fixed route services and bus shelters will improve reliability, service, and comfort. Healthy Savannah views transit as an integral element of our vibrant community and robust active transportation network. When combined with access to walking and biking, provides more options for people to move safely around our community. In our work, particularly through REACH, we hear frequently about the importance of transit for access to work, shopping, school, and services. And we applaud CAT for your leadership through the development of the Master Transit Plan. Thank you for moving towards implementation of these critical improvements, which will enhance the quality of life for our residents of Chatham County. We are grateful to be in partnership with you. Thanks, Paula. And Paula is with Healthy Savannah.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions or comments?
And Chairman, if we may, we have for the second reading, Ms. Cutter is here now to present. Okay.
Welcome, Ms. Carter. Budget reading.
Good morning, Board of Directors, colleagues, and guests, and to the public at large. I am pleased to come forward with an overview of the proposed FY24 operating and 5-year capital plan.
Pause.
Do we need to close the
Coming
public?
out of the public hearing now? Are we still in?
We could vote if there's no other comments, but there may be after the presentation. Normally we'll do the
Well, I didn't
presentation
know whether this was
first.
part of the,
Yes,
of the
ma'am.
public. Okay.
It is. It's
I
a
just
part
don't
of the
want us to
fiscal
get in
year
any
24
trouble.
budget.
Thank you. Let's go. Thank you.
Okay, of course, with every organization, FY '24 brought several challenges. Some of those challenges were the loss of COVID release funds when it came to the revenue side of things, our measured return of service delivery, thus lower ridership. We're looking forward to return of our senior circular, our partnership with the Department of Human Services, reestablishing our relationship with the colleges and universities through our UPass program. And of course, with all of these services missing, it had a major impact on our fare revenue. Expenditure challenges included the cost of insurance, which escalated in every category, health and property, between 30 and 50%. The challenges of recruitment and retention, competitive pay and benefits. As we've done in the last couple of years, we've tried to enhance our pay and our benefits, not doing everything, because of course everything is based on the revenue to support what we do, but we have moved forward with improvements in pay and in benefits over the last couple of years. Our health insurance premiums are going down, and there will be a set aside for pension plan enhancements. The FY '24 proposed budget is operating budget is $31,830,235, an increase over fiscal year '23 of $1,768,057. It's a structurally balanced budget where revenues equals expenditures. Our revenues by type is presented in the graph displayed. Again, the total budget for the year, $31,830,235. Fare revenue, $1.2 million. Agency revenue, a little over $9 million. Transit tax revenue, $14 million. Grant revenue, a little over $5 million. Other revenue, $1.6 million. Our expenditures by division are depicted on the graph. As you can see, the highest expenditure category for FY '24 is administration, and that includes all of the administrative departments, executive, finance, human resources, safety, security and risk, IT, administrative services, board administration and support. These are the expenditure categories by division, totaling the total operating budget of $31,830,235. Our capital budget for fiscal year '24 totals $17,667,313. Again, revenues projected equaling expenditures. The expenditures focus for capital is as listed under expenditures. which really includes the construction of ferry vessels, the ferry maintenance facility and dock, fleet replacement and refurb, building enhancement, electric bus infrastructure, automated passenger count software, and computer laptop equipment. This is a summary of the fiscal year 24 budget, providing highlights over the major components of the budget. The final budget document will be completed and posted once approved by the Board of Directors. Are there any questions, comments? If not, that concludes my portion of the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
I do have one question. Where in that budget are our savings reflected?
A part of the FY23 savings, and I'll go back to it, is captured in the other category line item.
Okay. I mean, I know that's considered revenue, but I mean, should it be itemized that it's money that's set aside?
That's in the line item detail that was presented in the spreadsheets,
Okay, I did not go through those.
the budget in brief, yes.
That would be like a portion, that'd be like a portion of the savings is considered income?
That's a
how it kinda
portion
works?
of fiscal year 23 savings that was needed to balance the fiscal year 24 budget.
Okay, got it.
But I guess that really doesn't answer my question now that you bring that up. I'm interested, this is revenue, so we had revenue above our expenditures because we were able to put revenue into savings, correct?
For fiscal year 23, we had revenue left over.
Okay.
Yes.
That is not reflected, I guess is what I'm trying to
Well,
say.
this is the fiscal year 24 budget.
Okay, okay.
Some
but-
of the savings will be used for capital purchases. And if you recall, during our workshop, we talked about how we were going to replace vehicles. We talked about the IT needs. We talked about a potential need to help with the third ferry vessels. So some of that money will go towards that. This amount reflects and help us to cover the increased costs of insurance primarily.
I think, Helen, one way to think about it is this would be a profit and loss report.
Right.
And what you're talking about is probably gonna be on the balance sheet with all of our
I'm
other
more
assets.
interested in Kat's overall picture. And I know that we did have some revenue that was put into savings, and we've got that Georgia One Trust.
Yes.
So, and I believe we did talk about the need to keep some money in reserves.
Yes.
So I understand that that's not necessarily reflected here, but where should that be reflected?
That will be on the year-end closing reports. It will also be shown in our FY23 audit
Okay.
report.
No, I'm talking about our additional revenue.
In addition, when I give the financial reports later, the investment account and all of that will be reported.
I'm just talking about our budget in general.
I'm waiting to see if there are additional questions.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions or comments?
Chairman, that would close us out at this time for public comments. And if we'll take
Take a first and a second to come out of public hearing.
Second.
Second.
and I'll do a roll call vote.
Yes.
Thank you. Director Emister,
Yes.
Director Odell,
Yes.
Director Stone,
Yes.
Director Lockett,
Yes.
Director Adams,
Yes.
Director Robinson,
Yes.
Director Leggett. We're taking a vote to close the public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Director Leggett, yes. Director Taylor? And Chairman Cody?
Yes.
Chairman, motion passed to close
Thank you.
public hearing.
At this time, we want to go into our presentation. Do we have our supervisor, our education supervisor, Mr. Darius Foster? All right, so we're gonna move right on to our presentation. First and foremost, will be the future transit briefing. Mr. Paul Skatas.
Well, good morning.
Morning.
Great to see all of you here, Mr. Chairman. Great to see you this morning, Faye and the team. My name is Paul Skoutelis. I'm the President and CEO of the American Public Transportation Association. For those of you maybe not as familiar with APTA, let me just give a very brief description. We represent the public transportation industry across the U.S. and parts of Canada as well. And our main function is advocacy, to be able to work in Washington, D.C. on the Hill, to advocate with Congress and the administration for more investment in public transportation, which I think there's no doubt that everyone in this room understands the importance of having more resources to invest in our communities to expand public transportation opportunities. That's our primary function, but we also provide a whole myriad of services from technical support. We conduct peer reviews. Agencies often get in touch with us to ask about a specific issue that they need help on. We'll bring together an expert panel to address those. So services that are really geared to helping our transit organizations in particular, but we are a public-private partnership. The public side is all the agencies like CAT who are APTA members, large and small, all across the country in all 50 states. And the private sector, these are contractors, consultants, manufacturers of bus and rail equipment and suppliers. So we do bring together both the public and the private sector, which I think is a very powerful set of messages in terms of communicating to the administration and Congress the importance of transit, the need for more investment, and the like. Over the last day and a half now, I've had the opportunity and privilege to be here in Savannah in Chatham County to meet with many of you in the room. We had a wonderful reception last evening, had a chance to talk about what's happening here. Earlier in the day, Faye and I, your Chief Executive Officer, were able to spend some time talking about the kinds of new initiatives that are happening here locally, what CAT is prioritizing, and also to view some of the system. Had a wonderful little ride on the ferry boat, which I think is a nice compliment to the operation. So let me say very briefly, I think all of us in this room certainly know it's been a very difficult 3 years through this pandemic. It's had devastating effects on so many industry sectors, public transportation being one of those in a very serious way. We saw ridership decline by 90% around the country for obvious reasons. We shut the economy down. We say, stay home. We don't know what the impacts are going to be of COVID. As a result, it did give an opportunity for public transportation to show how important it was, because throughout the pandemic and certainly those early months when we really didn't understand what the implications would be or the consequences of the COVID, frontline operators, bus operators, maintenance personnel, others on the front lines were there every single day to serve the public. And I think the public came away with a deeper understanding of the importance of public transportation. That's what we have found in our polling and talking to various segments of our communities, that people realize just how important public transportation is. And in many respects, it's not an overstatement. It's heroes serving heroes. It's the frontline workers out there taking people to their jobs that entailed going to the grocery store, jobs at clinics and at healthcare centers and the like, allowing many of us who really had the opportunity to stay home because of the nature of our jobs to be able to conduct our lives. So we really owe a debt of gratitude to those frontline workers. And I think public transportation was shown in that light of just how vital it is. when I go around, and one of the great privileges of my job is I can travel all around the country and meet firsthand with the elected officials, with board members, as you have here, with the CEO and staff, and find out what's on their minds, what are their challenges, what's going on. And I see firsthand really the terrific work that's going on around the country. Public transportation hasn't always been viewed as a forward-looking industry. And I can tell you, in what's transpired over the last 3 years in particular, there's a whole different mentality that's happening in our industry, brought about by the pandemic, but also changes that were afoot even before the pandemic struck us. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about a need to look forward, to adapt, to change. And I think that's what you all represent in this room, and certainly the leadership at CAT, including the board and the staff. You're all about change, because we know that we have to adapt and change for the future if we're really going to be vital and important to our communities going forward. And that's what I come away with in the last day and a half, seeing firsthand the commitment that you all have as a board and as a staff. You've got a dynamic CEO, which you're very fortunate to have, but I also found out that you've got a great relationship between the staff and the board, which I think is absolutely vital. It's not always in place, but it is key for a successful entity that is a good partner in the community. And one of the things that I often see and talk about is the need for a board to embrace their CEO, help that CEO become successful, and the CEO in turn to work with that board in an open, respectful manner, recognizing that each board member, while they may not be transit experts, bring a whole many different aspects of influence and experience to the board. Each of you, if we went around the table, would offer your special expertise that you have in the community, and the fact that you understand your community, you understand where the decision making is. I think that combination of an effective leader, as you have in Faye, and a dedicated board that's willing to commit their time and interest is really the key to having a successful organization. And the key to that, of course, is that you look beyond the borders of what you control. Certainly everybody wants to know you're providing efficient bus service and ferry service, and you're doing that in a timely fashion. But the community at large really wants to know, are you a player in the community that we can count on? Are you a collaborator? And what I have seen in the last day and a half is that, in fact, you are moving in that direction in a very big way. One example is the SMART grant. And I'm sure Faye has told you that the competition for that was very stiff. The competition for dollars in Washington is very keen. So to be able to garner approval for a grant like that says something about the belief that they have that you're on the right track, that you're really thinking innovatively, and that you're doing things that are worthy of federal support. So I commend you for all of that. But when you look behind the curtain, it's all about smart mobility and looking for other ways to augment your fixed route services, knowing that that has to change. And so bringing together your fixed route system, your paratransit operation, and thinking about it in the context of micromobility really sets you up for ways, more efficient ways, more creative ways. I commend you for that. That's what we all want to see. And certainly the federal government, is looking to make investments, is looking for that as well. So let me just say that I'm very pleased to have been here for this time. I congratulate you on the path that you're on. Let me also just warn you, it's not an easy path. Okay, public transit, I've been in the business for over 40 years. There are challenges at every turn from any different source that you can imagine. But at the end of the day, the degree to which you work through those, you problem solve together, you help each other be successful, you'll get through that. But it's not for the faint of heart. Transit's not an easy business at all, but you're on a great path, a great trajectory. Stay together as a board and a staff, continue to make progress and help each other. You will be in the community seen as a key player at the table to help in a whole host of issues that you'll have before you. And we have a lot of issues in the industry. We have workforce challenges, finding the right talent to hire, frontline employees, professional talent. Everybody's experiencing those, but we're experiencing them in transit. We have an environment that seems to have taken a little different turn since the pandemic, with a lot of social disorder that plays out in our transit system. So more attention to safety and security issues going forward. But none of these are impossible to solve if we work together. So I commend you again for what you're doing. Pleased to see the progress that you're making. We stand ready to assist however we can, as APTA being in Washington, D.C. If you happen to come to Washington, please look us up. We're right in the heart of the district. We'd be happy to see you there and make sure that your trip is worthwhile. But continue the great work you're doing, and thank you again for being such gracious hosts. I've enjoyed the time with you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. I want to say that it was a pleasure meeting Mr. Gonzalez yesterday. He has a very uncanny knowledge of transit, and we really appreciate you for coming and share that with us. Next, we want to move on to property and casualty insurance with Sterling Seacrest Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and CAT Board and leadership. Appreciate you all having me here today. By way of introduction, I'm Cindy Robinette, and I'm a partner with Sterling Seacrest Pritchard, and we have the privilege of serving as CAT's insurance broker and advisor. And you've already heard some of the bad news from Ms. Cutter of insurance cost increasing. So what I hope to do today is present to you CAT's renewal of their programs from property and casualty that take place on July 1, talk about some of the changes as well as the overall market, and provide some color of what we're seeing in the market as the backdrop to those increases. And then I'll also say, fortunately, where we projected is not where we landed. We did land a little better than our projections, so we're pleased with that as well. So, see if I can, there we go. And if you have questions or concerns as I'm going through the presentation, please don't hesitate to stop and interrupt, ask your questions rather than holding them, and we'll work through any concerns that you have. I thought it would be important to start with just a backdrop of the overall market itself in property casualty. And as you heard, we're seeing an environment of rising prices, volatility, particularly in the property segment. 2022 was a bad year as far as global catastrophes. We had Hurricane Ian with $50–60 billion worth of insured damages, second costliest insurance event since Katrina. But not just that, wildfires, ice storms, winter storms continue. So that really caused some challenges into the property market, where insurance carriers were reducing their capacity, the limits they're willing to offer, and increasing rate. So early indications were we're going to see a 30 to 50% increase in our property premium. Business insurance published most renewals in the second quarter average 40 to 50%. We in our firm have seen increases 100% and more, so it's really bad out there as far as property is concerned. We came in just under about 34% on the property side, so not good, but better than the market. As far as casualty is concerned, also still volatile, starting to see some stability in the liability lines, but we sit in a state of Georgia which is considered one of the worst venues as far as civil litigation. The American Tort Reform Foundation produces its annual report of the worst venues in the country. Last year, Georgia was number 3. This year, we made it to number 1 as far as the worst venues in terms of plaintiff-friendly juries and judicial system. Significant verdicts that we're seeing across the state. So not the easiest venue to be in from a liability standpoint. I guess one of the bright spots in the market, the workers' compensation environment, costs are stabilizing or even some rates going down. Now CAT's payroll's increasing, so we have some increases in that line, but overall that would probably be the only bright spot in the market at this point in time. So I thought I'd start first with the dollars, so you can see where the prices are coming in. To the left column is the expiring program on an annualized basis, and to the right middle is the projected renewal. And you'll see property, 36% increase in the rates. Again, that's all market driven. Equipment breakdown, that deals with accidental breakdown to mechanical, electrical equipment, pretty stable there. Commercial auto looks like a fairly large increase from just under $1.3 million to $1.5 million. The renewal rate overall was up 12.5%, which in the transportation segment, we're seeing rates in the 20-25%. So better than the market, and a lot of that just has to do with your leadership and the people that you have in place and some of the improvements we're seeing in risk management, safety, recent improvements. We also have some increasing values which are driving the prices up. We added 10 paratransit vans as well as 3 fixed route buses. When we add new buses with higher values and we take off buses with lower values, it increases our premium because it's based on the higher values. So that's the exposures were a large component of that rate increase. General liability, flat renewal, no changes there. Public officials liability, your management liability, as well as your employment practices liability, up about 10,000. That's getting closer to where actually the market is. There has been some claim activity over the past 10 years, so the Chubb has been the carrier that's been in place for a number of years. The benefit of Chubb, you may recall last year, they agreed to appoint your preferred legal counsel to defend single plaintiff cases, as well as to give CAT settlement authority. They have to come to you all before they're able to settle.
Cindy, I want to mention, remind the board, that is something that you all specifically requested last
Yes.
year, and we made sure that it was included as we're moving forward.
Good.
Question, what is a hammer clause?
Very good question. That has to do with the settlement authority, because with the insurance carrier giving Chatham Area Transit the final authority to settle, and you could say, no, we want to push it to the end, the insurance carrier wants you to have a little skin in the game, so that you just don't refuse to settle without looking at the overall picture. So if there is a potential to settle at X amount and CAT refuses, and the case goes on, and it settles for higher than that offer amount, then CAT is on the hook, has to pay for 30% of those additional costs above the original settlement offer. That 70-30 split is better than what we had in the past. It used to be 50%, only to certain lines of coverage. So, but that's a standard clause in the insurance industry when you have the ability to refuse settlement. Workers' compensation, that may jump off the page, those dollars, because that's a significant increase. Most of that is payroll driven. Driver payroll up 24%, and workers' compensation premium is a rate times payroll. So the rates actually went down a little bit, but the payroll was up. We also did have an increase in what's called the experience modification factor, and that's something that's established by the National Council of Compensation Insurers. They look back 3 years at your experience, ignoring the current year, and they determine based on the claims if your claims experience is worse than industry average. And right now, they're saying it is. You're 67% worse based on that 3-year look back. I do feel like with the controls and the people and the claim management process that are in place now, you'll see that experience might trim back down over the next several years. But you're going to have time to get through that because it's a 3-year rolling out.
I would mention here too, this is also a place, and we've mentioned it to the board, I think in committees, where Ms. Cutter and I are working on some programming that would incentivize, not just deal with it on one side, but also deal with it on incentivizing safety and so forth in a way that helps to recognize good safe behaviors and zero accidents and all those kinds of things. So we'll be bringing forward more recommendations around that to the board.
Question, real quick. What is a light duty RTW program?
Yes, good questions. So that's a light return to work, RTW, light duty. So when someone goes out on workers' compensation, they may not be able to return to their regular job because they have restrictions from their position, but there may be something that they can do. So we are working with CAT and CAT's insurers to develop a more robust light-duty return-to-work program so that that employee, when they're injured, is not sitting home listening to plaintiff lawyer commercials. They're actually coming in and doing something meaningful in a different capacity with their work restrictions within their work restrictions. And then you reduce the indemnity costs that are paid out and those type of claims, and that also goes to reduce the experience fund. So all these things equal fewer costs for CAP.
Would it be correct to understand that if somebody is out on workers' comp, if they're at home, that's paid by insurance, but if they're here, that's paid through payroll?
The insurance still pays that portion, but there's been a challenge that CAP would bring people back at a lower level job, and then there's a differential for what they were making before, and insurance would pay that differential. But at the end of the day, if it's paid by work comp, your premium is based on
Yeah. So the whole point of that is to reduce our premiums.
Yes,
Yeah.
reduce your premiums and claims costs
Okay.
over time. That's exactly right. And employees that come back to work tend to recover faster. Their overall claim is less, and they're also typically less attorney involvement in the case, which also reduces the cost. As far as the other lines of coverage, privacy, security, liability, cyber, that market is still a little problematic. We're seeing a lot of claim activity. The good news for Chatham Area Transit is you're able to achieve a flat renewal because a number of controls have been put in place since the prior year, multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection and response, etc. A lot of technical terms, but significant improvements that allow the underwriter to agree to a flat renewal there.
So did they do an audit and give us best practices, or we did that on our own?
Last year they came back to you because you all fill out an application that's very in-depth about all the IT controls.
Right.
And they noted several areas that were vulnerabilities, so they came back and said, before next year, we want you to implement these protocols. And you all took that and right away put the programs in place. So when they reviewed this year's application and saw all the improvements, they agreed to not, increase the pricing. Your crime program, employee dishonesty, that's remaining flat as well. So overall, I think I calculated about a 24% dollar increase. But again, a lot of that is exposure revenue. And we'll go quickly through each of the programs so you see. This is the property and equipment breakdown. Axis and RSUI are the two insurers that write the property program. One writes the first $10 million and the other sits on top to write the excess. You do have some sub-limits for flood and earthquake of $5 million. And then deductible, all other perils is $5,000. You've got a 1% wind deductible, which actually is pretty good. Many carriers are requiring 2%, 3%, and 5% of values for wind. Your flood deductible is $100,000. No change in the terms and conditions from the prior year, just the premium went up quite a bit. Because you can see, we scour the market each year in the property world because it's changing so drastically. And we did have some other players, but no one that could be competitive with the pricing. That's where we landed. On the auto and general liability, RLI Transportation is the carrier, and they've been in place for a number of years, a very good partner. We've been through some ups and downs on claims experience and everything. They work very well with us, and our claim and risk management team now feel very comfortable with the controls in place. So they extended a renewal again at a below market rate increase of 12.5%. There is a $25,000 deductible for auto liability and general liability that's paid for by Chatham Area Transit, and a $10,000 physical damage deductible. They've waived any collateral requirement for funding those deductibles other than a cash loss fund based on the longevity of the relationship. And again, a number of carriers that we talked to, the two most prevalent competitors, Carolina Casualty and National Interstate, still cannot be competitive right now with the pricing of the program. And here's the rate comparison, so you can kind of see the 22, 23 expiring with the renewal, and you'll note that there were 10 new paratransit units. The number of buses were the same, but we took off some older ones and added some new ones, so values are up. So rates up about 12.5%. We also have what we call catastrophe physical damage coverage. If there was a tornado or other event that took out all the buses at once, we have catastrophe coverage. Because our values are increasing, that price went up as well. We went from about $13 million in value or catastrophe limit to a $16.8 million limit. And that's all driven really by the property market because they're looking at those hurricanes and tornadoes and things, the possibility there. So you see the 156 to the 208, that's that catastrophe coverage that increased higher than some of the others. Workers' compensation, Eastern Alliance is the insurance carrier, $2,500 deductible, otherwise fully insured. There's your premium there. We indicated the estimated losses within the deductibles. We did get another option from Encova, a predominant work comp carrier, but their premium for a similar program was significantly higher. They offered some large deductible options, but when you take the estimated cost of the deductible claims with the premium and the collateral requirements, it just doesn't make sense to move to those options. Public officials and employment practices liability, an overall $3 million limit, no changes really in the program or the retention, just the premium increase. And again, some of that market driven because your pricing was well below what we're seeing other carriers in this space. In fact, AIG not only requires a minimum retention of $100,000, their pricing is over $100,000. So we feel good about the program and with the concessions we talked about with legal counsel and consent stuff. Cyber liability and crime, no, we talked about that, no real changes there other than, they're looking at your account favorably. And then the commercial crime, employee theft, forgery, alteration, you see your limits there. Social engineering is where you have a fraudster trying to trick you, an employee for sending money to a fraudulent account, $100,000 limit there. We are seeing some increased activity in that area of cybercrime. And last, we always say additional coverage considerations. We always talk to management about this. You can always buy more limits, look at additional lines of coverage. Not necessarily recommendations from us, but we also always want to bring out that there are other options out there that you consider. Pollution liability is one we talked about before. But
We don't have fiduciary liability?
You don't have fiduciary liability insurance. Some differences in the past. And directors of public officials liability, but not fiduciary liability.
We've had it in the past though, right?
Not since we've been involved, no.
What is that?
It's liability associated with employee benefit, retirement pension plans, errors and omissions, and making poor investment choices, excess fee litigation, that sort of thing.
Cool. If we wanted that, do we talk to?
Yeah, if you're interested in pursuing that coverage, we would just need fill out an application.
Okay, all right.
That would likely be added to the Chubb suite of products.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a big cost?
Yes.
Not usually.
It might be something to talk about in the future.
It's something we probably should have. Workplace violence expense, what's that running? About,
Well, it kind of depends on the limit you're buying, et cetera.
Does the
It's
state-
somewhat of an expensive coverage for what you're getting, because you're getting more of the expenses to counsel employees afterwards, crisis management type expenses, not your litigation costs. It's more crisis response reimbursement costs.
so a workplace violence falls under the BOP?
Workplace violence, if there was a liability, would fall under your general liability and your work comp,
Okay.
depending on who was injured. But when you have to pay your public relations expenses to, and potentially there could be some loss of revenue in a workplace violence product,
Right.
if people were scared to ride on a bus because of whatever happened. don't have a large take-up of these products because the prices are fairly high relative to the limit you're getting. So an option is to just have a reserve fund for, and rather than paying the insurance carrier the money that is going to be gone.
Okay.
If you want to pursue fiduciary liability, we can get that and bring it back to you all, and when we do the marine liability.
One other thing under workplace violence is some of the things that you mentioned that could be covered under that as an expense reimbursement, for example, counseling or whatever. We actually have things in place, both with Chatham County and with the city of Savannah, to leverage existing resources, community resources, to be able, for example, in that particular piece of what could be covered, to do those kinds of things. So I think that those are things that we've thought about as a part of our safety, security, and risk management suite. And how we go about doing those things, should we ever have that kind of an incident, is also already something we've given some thought to without benefit of having that kind of an insurance product to do it.
EAP programs are under health insurance, or they fall under health care insurance?
Happy to take any other questions, concerns.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts.
It's good seeing you. We only get to see you once a year.
I know. You might see me again in July.
Next on our presentation, we will have our master transit plan recommendations by Nelson Iker.
Also wanted to mention to the board, as George and the team is coming up to present, is that we sent the final report out to you earlier this morning. Again, it is still completely consistent with all the information that has been shared with you over the last months during the development of the master transit plan. However, it's in its final form now. You will be offering comments between now and July 17th, and then at that point, the team will be finalizing the report, and when we come back in July for your consideration of adoption, there'll be a big hard copy bound document in its final presentation form and for distribution with our community partners. So just wanted to be sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faye. My name is George Meyer. I'm with Nelson Nygaard in the Master Transit Plan team. I'm joined here with Amanda Vandergrift, who is going to be talking a little bit about how to fund the plan. So our presentation is split out into a handful of parts. We do want to briefly give an overview of Chatham Connects. That's the master plan, all the service and capital plans that we've been talking about and forming over the past year. We're going to get into specific recommendations for the plan. Okay, great. Thank you. So then we'll jump into the recommendations of the plan, followed by how the various options for funding the plan, and then lastly, kind of how those two things meld together. How do the recommendations and fundings really meet, and where the rubber hits the road, and how do we make everything happen? And so we'll begin with a little bit of background on Chatham Connects. That's our branding for the plan. It really starts with the leadership at CAT, the board of directors, you all, and the partner agencies, really kind of leading the charge in terms of strategies and goals. But then there are other pieces to this puzzle, such as the COA and TDP element, which looks at the shorter range, 3 to 5 years. What are the short-term improvements? A lot of the immediate challenges, such as operator shortages, that have been going on, how are those things resolved. And then the master transit plan really focused on what's next. You know, what are our dreams for the system over the next 4 to 10 years? You know, looking at both operating and capital resources, and then also, of course, you know, revenue integrates and how realistically could all of those dreams become reality. This is kind of a roadmap of the past year of the master plan. It really started at late summer and early fall of last year, where we got started with a lot of data analysis and existing conditions analysis, went through extensive community involvement and engagement efforts. And really, you know, it brings us all the way up to here, where we have recommendations, where we're looking for board approval. And so we're excited to present all of this to you and get feedback on those plans. And so here is kind of the last handful of steps. We've presented the draft master plan in May, and you know, then we kind of focused from the recommendations into those funding strategies. We've had various meetings and presentations with you all, elected officials, regional stakeholders, you name it. And now, you know, here we are presenting recommendations, looking for approval next month. One more reminder before we get into the recommended master transit plan. These are recommendations that you all have seen before. We have been fine-tuning and making minor adjustments, reacting, taking feedback. But really, it all kind of comes back to you know, the strategic priorities of the board, turning those strategic priorities into a series of goals that are actionable in terms of improving transit service, with the service and capital improvements, and improving that passenger experience. And we'll get into more of these throughout the presentation. Improving reliability and also expanding equity. And so we did want to kind of call out equity as an important focus of this effort. And it really, you know, we've taken the strategies from the board, turned them into goals. We have taken those goals and really created a series of service and capital improvements. Lastly, though, we've applied them through this equity framework to really you know, focus on those in our community that have been historically disadvantaged and the most vulnerable. How do we reach those communities effectively and really you know, help improve access to jobs and everyday activities. So I'm going to now go through some of the investment framework. We've really with all of these recommendations, we've kind of phased them into we've put the recommendations into buckets, short, medium, and long-term strategies, and we've have timeframes associated with each of those, and we've focused on you know, phasing in various strategies throughout that time frame with all of the feedback that we've received, including that equity framework that we've talked about. And so we're going to go through each of those phases now. And so for the short term, that's the first handful of years. That's really the kind of the jumping off point where we've incorporated a lot of elements from the COA TDP team. You know, kind of working and coordinating very closely with them, but creating a series of service improvements. Some of these have already happened, actually. So you see the expansion of the DOT shuttle, for instance. Also in the short-term plan, we've had we're planning for a large increase in service that's 30 minutes. You know, one of the things that we've seen for CAT is that, 60 minutes, 80 minute, 120 minute service really isn't that useful. A lot of folks are just asking for, our existing service. It's out there. We just need it more frequently. And so we've expanded 30-minute service throughout a lot of the system right in the short term. We also have included in the short term, the use of the SMART grant funds for microtransit service. So we'll start with 3 and then eventually expand with a 4th at the end of the short term on Wilmington Island. But then also, of course, a lot of the feedback that we also got was that we needed to look at bus stops and the passenger amenities. The passenger experience really starts at the bus stop, not necessarily the bus itself. So giving folks a dignified and respectful environment and improving those bus stops will really go a long way. And then in the medium term, so that's the 2028 through 2030, we use that short term as a jumping off point to expand into a number of new areas. So here we have our frequent network where we've improved certain routes and certain corridors to an extent where they're operating every 15 minutes. And so that's what we're using as kind of that frequent service. We've expanded microtransit, especially using that equity framework into a couple of the locations, the new ones being kind of that West Savannah area and Liberty City area, the new zones you see on the map to the right. But then also, not forgetting that we need to continue throughout the short and the medium term, improving things like those bus stop amenities as well. And start commuter express service. And so for the medium term, that probably looks like maybe 2 express routes that are not shown here, but are included in the report. And then finally, our more ambitious longer term strategy here from 2031 out to 2035. We have yet another expansion of that 15-minute service. So we have a number of routes operating at every 15 minutes. We have just about the entire system operating every 30 minutes. Additional microtransit zones throughout almost the entire county, reaching a greater number of people, giving people more options. And I think it's a very exciting, bold vision for Savannah-Chatham County. We also wanted to call out a handful of specific areas that we're looking to improve and kind of show the timeline throughout, specifically for marine services, so that the Bells Ferry, over the short term, we're very soon, purchasing and replacing 3 vehicles. And rehabbing a 4th that we think still has some useful life in it. And then over the medium term, expanding another vessel, so a total fleet of 5, and adding with a new West End dock on the western side of River Street. And then finally, in the long term, adding an additional vehicle as well for a total of 6. And so microtransit, as you probably have noticed throughout, the medium and then especially the long term, we've got a total of 12 microtransit zones throughout the county. And for each of these microtransit zones, we focused on reaching the most people and really capturing a lot of the developed area and putting in, tying in each of those microtransit zones into mobility hubs, so folks have a convenient, attractive, pleasant area to connect to that fixed route system. Each of these areas have the grocery stores that folks would be able to connect to on a 1-seat ride, so they're giving folks a lot of options. And so in the immediate term, the short term, having those 4 zones, but then expanding by 2 in the medium, and then eventually up to potentially 12 for the longer term. We also wanted to call out And so we have a couple of bar charts on the right, really illustrating over the existing short, medium, and long term, the population and jobs accessible with transit, both just any service at all, but then specifically 30-minute frequency. So, kind of that bar for more attractive service that will make that service more accessible. And so from going from the existing to short term, it doesn't necessarily increase jobs or population that dramatically, but if you look at a 30-minute service, a huge proportion of that population and number of jobs is being served much better. So instead of getting service maybe once an hour or less often, you're getting service every 30 minutes. Another thing that we wanted to highlight has been high school connections. This is something that we've been looking at for a lot of the master plan process. And as we've designed zones, microtransit zones, as we've looked to improve transit service, we've kept a keen eye on where those connections to high schools are to give folks that are, either going to their local school or through the school choice program, being able to connect to the system as easy as possible to be able to get to school. Because when this is a picture from, we got a chance to meet with St. Johnson High School students and heard their stories firsthand of some of the struggles that they have getting to and from school, with working parents and with kids that aren't necessarily going to the same school. Just giving those folks another option to be able to get to those schools was another priority for us. But not just grade schools, colleges and universities are an important part of Savannah and Chatham County as well. So we've got a number of improvements highlighted here throughout each of the various phases, and we think that giving folks more opportunity and access to these higher ed locations would be a really great benefit.
I got a question.
Absolutely.
GSU didn't set up their own.
So I think this would connect people to their campus. So it would connect people from around Savannah to the Armstrong campus at GSU.
Right. So
How's that different from what we do now? The bus stops on the outside of the campus.
So we could jump back to, so this specifically is talking about the 4A and providing access to the way the route is aligned. It'll provide students much better access to campus than they can still take the 14, for instance. 4A gives much more direct access to folks who are at that campus.
What?
Right here.
More direct access than stopping in front of the campus? Well, I don't understand what you mean.
So the 4A currently does not, or the 4 does not currently go have this alignment to serve the campus. I mean, we could look at
That alignment starts, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand. On Abercorn, which is like our most busy route, especially near the campus, there are multiple bus stops, like on both sides of the street. So I'm not understanding how this transit plan changes and makes that better. I understand trying to get to the other two schools, but Georgia Southern's pretty accessible, well, Armstrong. So how does that make it better?
So it, just by way of going all back through here, provides
Is that
access
Abercorn?
to this red one is 14, that's Abercorn.
Okay, and the 4A is what?
Goes, that's Bernard, the new alignment that,
I'm sorry, Denise Kowalski for the city, also member of the team. I believe that goes down Windsor Road, so it would take you down the backside of campus and provide better access to some of the residential, recreational, and other classroom buildings that are not as accessible to Abercorn. So it improves the access on the backside and in the inside part of the campus. not just the agricultural side. So there's students, so a lot of the residential structures on Georgia Southern's Armstrong campus
Yes,
are
on the
on that
right-hand
back
side,
side.
and
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
behind where the auditorium is.
Yes, ma'am. So it would
Well, the
provide better
gym.
access. It would provide better access to that portion of the campus.
So you
And
can
also,
start going through Windsor Forest. Because.
we can look at the map in more detail.
Because to get to that particular place,
Mhm.
you have to go like down a main road in Windsor Forest.
Right.
That's a side road through a neighborhood.
Director Odell, let us,
Windsor Road, and it would also improve access to Windsor Forest High School
You go
as
down
well.
Windsor Road, you make a right, you go right behind Armstrong, and then you got the condos on your left.
Yeah, but you go through the neighborhood.
Yes,
this would be going through the neighborhood with microtransit.
yeah, because Windsor Road is.
So it's not going to be the big bus going
That's
through.
home, but once you make the right on the street behind Armstrong, you have the condos to your left.
Yeah, you got houses on the condos are on the left and the houses are on the right, and then you go down and you run into the fields, the baseball, soccer, all of that.
Director Odell, what we'll do is let us set up a call with you to go over this in a little more detail and also, sort of dig a little more into maybe any comments or concerns you have on it and resolve those. But again, it's in terms of going through the neighborhoods, that's part of the benefit of microtransit is you don't have the same kind of impact from the neighborhood. It's actually a more neighborhood scale of transit. So I appreciate that comment. That's you're making us continue even in these moments to think a little bit more. So.
Any other questions? All right, so with that, I'm going to pass it off to Amanda.
Thank you, George, and I think it's afternoon now, so good afternoon. So George talked a lot about the what, and now I'd like to talk a little more about the how. And we've talked about this before, but we'll go into just a little more detail, and I'm happy to answer any questions, so please feel free to stop me. To get us to where we want to go, the visionary change that George just talked about, we have to start with understanding where we are today. And we did just talk about the budget earlier today. We are on the right path. That's the good news. CAT has been making major steps forward, maybe leaps forward, Mr. Massimo. But you have a SMART grant that you were awarded. You have new state dollars that were not a part of your operating and your capital budgets last year that are in your operating and capital budgets today and will be into the future. You have new partnerships. You're operating new service. You had to make some very difficult decisions coming out of the pandemic to temporarily modify your service and improve reliability for your customers who need it the most. So you really have set the stage and set the foundation for getting yourself to what that end goal that George just landed on, that longer term vision. And that's all happening right now. You've set the stage, but now you're really presented with enormous growth in the Savannah-Chatham region. Now catapulted by new development, the Hyundai plant, Amazon facilities, and many more developments that are going to need transportation options in the future. But unfortunately, like the rest of the country, you are experiencing, and more than just the transit industry, as Paul said, you are experiencing operating costs that are much higher than what we had anticipated just a few years ago. Those operating costs, well above inflation, well above typical annual growth, but at the same time, your operating revenue is just about flat. So you can see on the right here, your primary local funding source, your special service district transit tax, really hasn't increased in over 5 years. And in fact, last year it was rolled back. Good news, it wasn't rolled back this year. I was so happy to see that. But what we really need is an increase. We don't want to maintain it and not increase it. What you really need is an increase in local funding to not just continue your existing service as you are today, but to fund the visionary improvements that George just talked about. So it leads us to ask the question, will CAT be able to meet Savannah Chatham's needs, mobility needs in 2027 and beyond? And I think everyone in this room can agree that the answer today is unfortunately no. But how do we get to yes? So I mentioned that we have operating costs that are higher than operating revenue, and like many headlines across the country, that is resulting in some future year issues that we need to also deal with. Your operating costs, if you continue those into the future and you continue your operating revenue into the future with no additional funding, with no additional local funding, we are projecting a fiscal cliff. A fiscal cliff would likely occur, and a fiscal cliff, the definition of that is when your operating costs exceed your operating revenue, and we're going to have to make some kind of adjustment, either new funding or decreases in costs or both. So by 2026, you'll fully spend your COVID relief funds, the remaining ARP funds that you've been using to balance your budget. And we'll need to start making decisions really today to start thinking through how do we replace those funds in the future to continue our existing operating budgets. In addition to that, so that's the first $5 million that we are anticipating needing by the time COVID relief funds are fully expended in 2027. In addition to that, everything George just mentioned also will cost more money. So we're assuming that would be about $7 million in addition, so about $12 million total to meet the master transit plan recommendations. And just to put that into context, your current major local funding stream, the SSD, is bringing in about 14 million. So we're looking at close to a doubling of that local source, as just into context, to fund both existing service and expansion. So that's on the operating side, which really is a big piece of your budget. But I also want to mention that there's another nuance on the capital side, and sometimes you can find a funding stream that funds both, but often it's a mix of several different funding streams on the local side mixed with federal and state to fund both your operating and your capital budgets. So on the capital side, on the operating side, the primary funding source for operating is local funding. That is usually supplemented by federal and state support, but the primary key piece is your local funding, and right now you're doing that with your special service district. There are several different opportunities, either expanding that current source, looking at something like a sales tax, cobbling together different local contributions from your partners in the region. And each of those have different trade-offs and different applicability to your capital and your operating needs. So for example, your current funding source, there it is, the special district transit tax. As we just saw, that one can be used for capital and operating, but it has a big limitation. Each year you go and you get it's subject to annual budgeting. So you really don't know year to year if it's going to be a rollback, if it's going to be maintained, or if it might be increased. But one of probably the most preferred long-term goals that you would want to be looking at is looking at a funding source that maybe doesn't have that kind of annual limitation. It really limits your ability to do long-term planning, to do long-term financial planning, and to really implement the vision that George just laid out. So that would really be looking at your mechanisms here in Georgia, something like a 30-year transit SPLOST, which is what two or three different counties are going after in the Atlanta region in the next few years. And just to mention too, while there's a lot of great federal and state support, most of that's really limited to the capital budget. So it's not really an operating source. We're going to be looking for, more than likely, a local funding increase to address your operating needs. But on the capital side, it's very important. You will be and have been limited by your local match to be able to pull down federal and state dollars. So, Paul Skoutelis was here and talking about change. Change doesn't happen overnight. Change is hard. Change takes time, leadership, and persistence. And that's something that will happen over the next few years from this board and the leadership in this room, pushing very hard to implement the strategies day by day that George just talked through. So we'll show you just one example of what that might look like, but keep in mind, this is based on a number of assumptions. You could use different funding streams that we've outlined in the report that was sent to you. This is just one of many, many scenarios that could occur to get you to that vision. So in the first short-term phase, we would assume in this scenario that you were able to secure local funding to address the fiscal cliff, and then you were able to secure more funding to invest in your system, get you to a good state of good repair, make real strong investments to help you start building that business case for increased investment in the medium and the longer term. We are assuming in this scenario that would come from your partners at the city and the county, but it could come from several different sources. We're also assuming, so that's on the operating side. On the capital side, we're assuming that project list that you passed as a board for the T-SPLOST. We're assuming that passes at some point soon. And that funding would then, you would use that to leverage federal support, state support, and you'd make some major capital investments. So in the medium term, we'd build that case incrementally to get our partners to potentially invest more in the medium term, to see more investment on the operating and the capital side, and potentially that T-SPLOST is renewed in 5 years and you have a bigger project list that you're able to fund. So that's in the medium term, and then we get to the point where you've made that case and you're ready for a long-term, dedicated, robust revenue stream. And we're looking at two different options here, because this also could be several different sources. One, we're looking at your current revenue stream being expanded and increased significantly, and the other, we're looking at a 30-year transit SPLOST. Any questions before I move forward on that? Okay, in the short term, we're looking at, this is your short list that was presented in the report that was sent to you. And we're just looking at incrementally turning on a few things. So we have the SMART grant you won, we have your formula funds that you use every year, and we have some CMAQ funding and the ferry funding that you use. And we'd assume that you'd receive some other smaller federal grants in the short term. You have your new state dollars that you've received, the Transit Trust Fund annual allocations, and the one-time fund $3 million that you got for the ferries. And then on top of that, we're assuming you're able to address your fiscal cliff and fund additional improvements with your partners at the city and the county. You see the T-SPLOST is on as well. We're assuming that passes, and that's primarily capital. There are some operating based on the project list that you passed.
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You've mentioned T-SPLOST multiple times and
Yes, ma'am.
recommended T-SPLOST. Do you also provide some type of marketing strategy to assist us in convincing the population to do that? Because it's failed twice.
It's failed once.
No, it's failed twice. It failed regionally and it failed locally.
Oh, you're talking about
The regional one, though, is a different, those are actually two different T-SPLOST, so.
Does not work in this particular area.
I think,
So we would need some type of marketing strategy that we could use to encourage people as to why T-SPLOST is important. Okay. So do y'all do that?
Does my firm do that?
Yeah.
We do assist on that, but APTA actually does as
Director
well.
Odell, one thing I would want to mention here is well, what we can do though, and we've done it in other places,
You cannot advocate, that's true.
we can't advocate, but we can educate. And our role is to educate and oftentimes to pair with the private sector or a group like the Chamber or Travel and Tourism or whoever it might be that comes behind with a more of an advocacy program. And I think your point is well made though, Director Odell. There are firms, especially firms that look at even sort of like niche pieces like the student population, college population, turning those folks out, but looking at what are the strategies that reach the likely voters and how you get the message to your likely voters and how you get the likely voters to the polls. And there absolutely there will be an effort around that.
Paul, you might have some.
I think that counting on T-SPLOST or putting it as a definite possibility in the state.
Paul, come on.
It's not a possible idea.
I'd just like to offer a comment, and that is, this is a service that is not as well known within APTA, but we have something called the Center for Transportation Excellence. And it is a contractual relationship that we have with several people. And their primary job is to assist local systems like yours with ideas about how to organize activities around making a campaign. So they won't do the campaign, but they'll give you lessons learned around the country. They'll provide you connection opportunities. They'll give you firsthand data in terms of where it's been done and their approaches. And that really then forms the basis of your decision making as to how might you want to go forward, whether you need to establish, when I say you, the broader community, establish an organization. It could be a chamber, it could be an offshoot of that then leads the effort. So we'd be happy to put you in touch with the right individuals within our organization to make that first conversation whenever you feel you're ready for that.
Director Odell, one other thing I would add too is I appreciate the concern that you're expressing. I think the importance of keeping it on this list is, again, remember with the master transit plan, we aren't committing to everything that's in it. What we're committing to is the vision, and that it can serve as a guide, and it helps us to have the conversations around funding sources or particular projects or timing of projects or how the network performs when it is built out in a certain kind of way. So sorry, this thing keeps going out on me. So the notion though here is to not constrain ourselves, but to put all of those ideas out there. And T-Spliced remains a topic of conversation between the county, the city, and the business community. And it is an important tool to continue to consider. And so all this is doing is saying, keep it out there for consideration so that we figure out how all this works together. And that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massimo. And I will just add to that too, the one of the big pieces of making the case is really doing the hard work to make that case. And that starts today. And then you make that case to your partners, you make that case to the public, to your customers, to the new customers that you bring on board from improving service and reliability. Those are the folks who are going to go to the ballot and vote. But that again, change takes time. It takes a lot of work. So
I was looking at the results from the last T-Spliced. I was given, and I'll just say this, but it felt like it had a bit of a lackluster marketing campaign behind it, unfortunately. I was surprised by how close it was. Even though it did fail, it was by less than 2,000 votes. And I think there is a case to be made that you could absolutely find 2,000 votes.
Yeah.
But I think it's got to be constructed and marketed much more strategically.
I think the important reason to continue to keep things like that out there too is, what we've talked about here and what you heard earlier from Paul and what this represents is that change is continuing. And I know this board supports and desires to have a healthy CAT and a CAT that provides the services in the community that are needed. The change that is necessary in order for us to do that, whether it's things like microtransit or whatever, we've still got to continue to be resourceful, creative, thoughtful in the examination of all the things that could possibly bring that healthy transit to fruition. Otherwise, we're going to be bound in some of the current constraints that we see. So I think it's important to continue to imagine, to envision, and to push for the best, and to do it with some thoughtful analysis behind it, as this master plan and this funding analysis enables us to do. Then the future will be, we will see as it comes to us, what it is, and we will figure out how to respond to that, but we'll do it with a great tool that helps to guide and direct us.
The last time we had a T-Spliced, it wasn't, the right kind of publicity behind it was not there, and we just didn't push it the way it should have. And that was a combination between the city and the county that really come together to do what needs to be done to get it passed. But I think if we do a better job of selling it to the public, we can get it done.
Director Luckett, I think I've mentioned to you before, I've worked on 9 Spliced referendums, all the way from referendum through implementation. Only one of those did not pass. It was the regional one in Atlanta that everybody I think is familiar with, but 8 others did. They're always dependent upon that first one. You've got to implement well so that you give the voters a reason to believe that you're reliable and that you're gonna give them what you've said that their dollars are going toward. And I also think the other important part of it, which you're bringing up, is you've got to have a very intentional campaign, both on the education and on the advocacy side. You've got to know who your likely voters are. You've got to know where they are. And you've got to give them the information and so forth that they need to get them to the place of making that decision. And so that is something, that kind of a robust and intentional and well-founded effort is something that I know that we have the capacity and the community wherewithal to undertake. And I believe that this, whenever this next time comes over the next several years or however long, we'll get it done.
Okay, this is great conversation. Did we have any other comments on that before we move forward? No?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think just we cannot provide transit service to everybody in the county just due to how the CAT Act is constructed, and the idea of expanding the special tax district to include everybody in the county is far more equitable in terms of who we've got access to and who has access to what we can do, and brings in some revenue as well. I think it'd be interesting to figure out, is that just like neutral? Are we perhaps going to be losing money if we expand all countywide? I'd be interested to know that. And then looking at like a lot of development over the last couple of decades happened within Chatham County, but now we're starting to see regional multi-county development, which is massive. And is there any way, I mean, we brought this up before, like looking at our neighboring counties as well, in order to help get everybody around.
I know Ms. Cutter had some comment on the tax district, and then I'll answer your last question also. Ms. Cutter?
I just wanted to state that a meeting has been planned to come around the table to talk exactly about that, a countywide transit district. And of course, if that is approved.
It's already been approved.
Countywide?
Yes. 3 years ago.
That's right. Everybody is not a part. And when I say countywide transit district, all municipalities within Chatham County being a part of the district wherein they pay the transit tax. And of course, if that ever occurs, then that increases revenues that come in to support transit operations.
I think we can start to look over the next year at that kind of analysis. Ms. Cutter mentioned those conversations that we have coming up. But that's got to be, again, that's another thing that's got to be a very thoughtful, deliberate process.
Well, I guess my point is that, let's say that tomorrow one of these municipalities says, all right, we're in your service district now. We have that extra revenue coming in, but now we've got the liability of having to provide the services, and how would that turn out? Would we be
That's
neutral?
the part of why we have the plan and the service planning and the work you're going to see in the COA TDP as well. The shorter term is how we would meet those needs. To answer your other question, I think that given the tremendous amount of economic growth that's in this region, I think that there is no question that how we approach that regionally through authorities and organizations that will be responsible for coordination of land use decisions and transportation investments, and in particular transit services. And that's one of the recommendations that you see in here out in the long term, is eventually some consideration around a regional transit authority. But I think that your point is well made, and I think it is also something that you're seeing the MPO and MPC have conversations around now. The chairman and I represent CAT on that board, and we hear those conversations about there's regional growth occurring all around us. How are we bringing all that together and incorporating it all and coordinating it? So I think that the good news is the conversations are occurring over what the solution should be, and we're still working towards that.
Great.
And I will mention too, just in terms of the mechanisms available to you today, this is not always the case nationally, but there's actually a current mechanism that's multi-county on the state level. So you wouldn't even need state changes, state legislative changes, and that's pretty rare. I don't see that very often. It's kind of set up for regional, but it actually doesn't allow you to do a county only. Yeah, which is what I would hope that we'd have that authority as well here, as a one step forward, instead of a leap to regional. But those are two, that's a current mechanism that goes up to 1% for 30 years for transit and transit supportive needs that you could do on a 2 or more county basis.
One other thing I would mention too, for the board to be aware of, is the county and the cities are involving us in the discussions around what, if, when, the whole deliberation around a T-Spliced. We are at the table with all of the cities and the county in continuing to work through what that can look like. So I want the board to be aware that, you know, the conversations continue, and we are there listening and understanding and hearing and figuring out how we can, whenever decisions are made, how we can, you know, be a part of that.
Look like we might have another question. Okay. All right. And you know, I'm glad this is bringing up a lot of great questions. This is an iterative process, and this is just one of many examples of how you could do something like this. So let's look at the short term. We are assuming in this short term scenario that you're able to address the fiscal cliff and you're able to fund additional improvements beyond that. So that's the gold bars you're seeing here. We have revenue, which is green bars, going all the way up to what we're hoping to invest in the master transit plan in the short term. And instead of using those COVID-19 relief funds, which you're currently using to prop up your operating budget, you would then use those funds strategically to make investments in CAT and get you ready for that midterm increased expansion. That new revenue would also be used to leverage more federal grants like your SMART grant, more state funding through your partners at the state level. And so you will see, as we continue to build the case, we'll be able to turn on more federal support, we'll be able to turn on more state support. We're going to have more local support in this medium term because we've made that case every day for several years, and we're ready for more investment. And in the medium term, you see a much higher level of local investment, which matches the visionary improvements we're putting forward in the medium term. That would then leverage more federal support, more state support, and potential partnerships to expand and improve your existing service. You see I think I didn't point this out in the last one, but we have capital budget targets. Those will be very dependent on what you're able to secure on the federal and the state level. But our operating budget in 2029 would be about 75 million compared to what you saw today was around a little under 32 million. In the longer term, we have two scenarios. I'll show you the first one when we're looking at an expansion of your current local revenue, your current special district transit tax. And we would fully fund a very visionary a set of improvements in the long term through a significant increase in expansion of your current local funding stream. This would fund your operating budget, and it would also fund a much larger capital budget to support investment in your system. A long-term funding stream opens the door for leveraging your funding through different ways, like state bond proceeds, state funding, federal loans, larger federal grant programs like the Capital Investment Grant Program. So it really opens the door for you to do major expansions and have bigger partnerships with your federal and state partners. And then what does that look like? Instead of property tax, you would look at a sales tax, and this is a 30-year sales tax authority. Same thing, we'd fund all of our improvements, and we'd have a capital budget target of around 60 million. I will say, comparing the two, I mentioned earlier, your special service district has one big trade-off, the fact that every year you're beholden to the budgetary process, where something like this sales tax, you would have a dedicated revenue stream for transit into the future that isn't subject to annual budgeting. Another thing is sales tax compared to property tax. Sales tax grows at a higher rate typically than property tax. And given the mechanisms available to you today, you have several mechanisms available to do something like this scenario. I can talk more about that if you have any questions. But that is the financial piece of how, and George will talk about what we can fund with that. Any questions before we move on?
Yes. I think we might want to look at a map of the specific alignment, maybe have a discussion about what exactly that looks like. It's tough with the maps that we have here to. Sure. Yep.
If the bus stops on that road, it's not going to do the students any good because there's a huge parking lot. They have to walk through the parking lot to get to the main campus. Bus would have to go on campus, at least go around the parking lot in order to be happy. Because if it's raining on a day like today, I go in for a bad day for lunch. Staff to make that walk from those buildings past the gym to the road. And I made that walk, that's how I know. That's why I was asking if the bus goes on, I guess you have to get clarity if George is going to go.
We could with an agreement with them.
Because if not, that's not a good day.
Director Taylor, that's an excellent suggestion, and we'll make sure to look at that. We need to look at that with the COA TDP work that's coming up too. That's that more fine-grained route, stop, that kind of thing. So let us take that. This is exactly what this meeting is intended to do, is to get your comments on where we are now so we can resolve those by the 17th. So let us take that comment in addition to the one we heard earlier from Director Odell and work on those and get some answers and any refinements back to you, and also see if there's something that we need to look at in the COA TDP work that you're also going to be hearing about next month to make that kind of action. Got it. I appreciate that, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Could not you use the same model that you use for Savannah State and going on campus?
We could, sir. We could.
Just overall, it sounds like.
You told her.
There we go. But it sounds like you're, this is like, and I think, Mr. Massimo, this was how you put it earlier, but this is really kind of we're not beholden to making any of these changes, but this is a framework for how to turn CAT into a $100 million a year organization in 10 years. According to the graphs, we're trying to be a $100 million organization in 10 years, which I think is fantastic. I feel like if anything, in the last 3 decades of CAT, it's been very, I'll just use that sound as my explanation, and having some sort of vision. I mean, you've got to have that. Even if we make it halfway to 100 million, would be impressive.
Well, I'll tell you what I think is really important, just from as a planner, and I think what's really important when you look at these visionary plans is less about focusing on we're going to become X size or X amount. I think what's more important is I think in some of these shorter term strategies should be ones that make us stretch a bit. Mm-hmm. And the longer term should be one that makes us a little uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Because again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a vision of, do we want to grow? Mm-hmm. Do we want to be the best and more? Do we want to be those things? And of course we do. But we've got to also, we will always be constrained by the resources that are needed to implement that. But it gives us a way to think about that in an organized way, and to think about it in a system level way, so that we're not just thinking about, we do this project, we do that project, we do that project over there, but we think about it more holistically. How does it fit together? How will the service be accomplished then in that kind of a network environment? But it gives us that little push we need to continue to figure out how to be the very best CAT. Without things like this, we either we generally will lose ground rather than even just staying constant. So I think from that part, it is very important. I think the other thing is when you go to look for partnerships, funding partnerships, whether that's at the federal, state, other local partners, public-private partnerships, all kinds of interesting things. When you go to the table and you say, well, now here's our master plan. The minute that an investor sees that you have put that kind of thought and deliberation into what you want to be, it ups your game. It makes you more competitive automatically every single time. And so that's why these kinds of things are important, but they should make you feel stretched a little bit in the shorter term, and they should make you feel a little bit, wow, in the longer term, because it's forcing you to think a bit. But keep in mind that this is a living, breathing document. It will be updated and revised as conditions change, as funding sources change, as our funding conditions change, as the desires of the community change. And that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be that kind of a living, breathing document. And it's not supposed to bind you. It's supposed to give you a tool to help guide your direction. And that's very specifically how we've presented it.
Thank you so much. Yep. So I think, with all the funding context, we want to kind of circle back to some of our service and capital projects, and start to look at with those funding assumptions, these scenarios that we've been talking about, and our service recommendations, our capital recommendations, start to put cost estimates and price tags with all of these improvements. And over the short term, and so we're looking at a design year of 2027. We're looking at an operating maintenance cost annual of about $40 million. And this would include those fixed route improvements that we talked about, expansion or implementation of 4 microtransit zones, and restoring the ferry service back to pre-COVID levels. And then also beginning a commuter service program. And then in terms of capital over that 4-year period, and this is not an annual figure, it's a total over the 4 years, for $45 million, we're replacing 3 ferries and refurbishing that 4th. We're updating the ferry maintenance facility and dock. And we're also doing additional improvements to CAT Central and the ITC facility, as well as maintaining a state of good repair, for things like our fleet.
George, let's do this. I know that we're covering a lot of material, and I want to be very respectful of the board's time. If we can just kind of move through, a lot of this is recasting what they've heard over the last 3 months, and we know that. We also wanted to be sure that we were being comprehensive and you're getting to see it all at one time, but you also have the document. So let's move through some of these things and be respectful of their time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for keeping us on track.
Absolutely.
Over the medium term, we've got $60 million annually in operating costs, and then $40 million again of those improvements that we talked about for a service that looks like the map on the right. And then over the longer term, we're looking at operating costs of up to about $110 million, and then $60 million in capital over that 4-year period. How's that?
I gotta say, personally, most important part of most of all of this is I think the 15-minute frequency on Abercorn would be a game changer for this community. It's already such a backbone of how people move around, and 15-minute frequency, I think, would just blow people away.
That is what is going to completely, just innovate exactly how CAT operates and how we're viewed and how we serve.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Any more questions?
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you for that presentation. I thank you all for your presentations. Next, we'll be moving into our consent action items. Do we have any questions? Do we have any members want to pull anything?
Make a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
Second. All right, Beverly, give me your roll call.
Approve.
She stepped out.
I'm sorry about that. Director Emerson?
Approve.
Thank you. Director Odell? Not present for the vote. Director Stone?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Lockett?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Adams?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Robinson?
Lost her.
Director Robinson, I'll come back by. Director Leggett? Not present for the vote. Director Taylor? Not present for the vote. Chairman Cody?
Director Robinson is yes. I was trying to get back in.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Chairman Cody?
Yes.
Thank you. Chairman, we have a approved vote for consent items 1 through 8.
All right, thank you, Beverly. We don't have any individual action items, so at this time, we're gonna take a break before we go into executive session.
Yes. Yes.
Into the report.
Let's do that.
No, we gotta go to the report first, executive report. We're gonna take a break right now. Thank you.
But can we keep going once we get our,
That'd be great. I agree. Thank you.
that would be good.
What do you, what was your name again? Padma? Yes. What do you do? Computer science is a broad industry. What are you interested in?
I'm interested in programming. Java is part of my core interest.
Oh my
Programming,
God.
artificial intelligence, that's where I'm interested in more, and a bit of data analysis as well. So these are three areas I'm more interested in.
I tried making like a, I tried using ChatGPT to help me write I tried using it to help me, I tried using it as like a tutor to help me write a Google spreadsheets program, and I was so over my head, but it was crazy how helpful it was. It was very scary. Like, just incredibly impressive, but programming's wild. That's a whole language. That's the whole language. It is, but then, you know, I look at my sales tax on my Howard, property tax. Good stuff you said. It's like $65. Not bad at all. It's just the multiplier effect. That was the household paying like $165 or whatever a year. It's like, damn, that's a huge amount of money. Very twisting. Also, I think it's like, it'll be a huge problem if we don't. It'll be a much bigger problem if we don't. Just I think like, I asked a question about like the regional things. I'm doing it. Brian County's tax digest is going.
All works okay, it's always there.
Just wild.
But
we get the impact of it all. They know what you have, like building restaurants.
Later,
All the crap.
You know that.
I mean, it's like, okay, I think it's just difficult for like, at times the human brain. How do we get back to?
Oh, yeah.
How long you been around?
How long you been around? And under construction.
How long have you been around?
4 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the Javits. Like they're Javits and so we're like, wow, it's only like the horror.
No, it depends on like the
So
perspective, right?
seriously.
What are we gonna do?
They're like,
Virtual attendees, thank you for staying on the line with us. The board took a break, a 5-minute break, and then when they return back in the room, we will go into the executive director's report and unit updates. Thank you again.
Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Butler.
You probably saw I've been in and out. The thing shut down on me about 10 times.
Beverly, this is Director Leggett. I'm on the way back. I should be there in a second.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you both.
We good? All right. I'd like to welcome everybody back after our break. We're now going to move into our executive director's report. I'm going to turn the floor over to our CEO, Mr. Massimo.
Directors, our update for the executive for the CEO was included in your packet. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Very good. I'll turn the next the service delivery update will be Dr. Manny.
Good afternoon, board. Thank you, board of directors and Chairman Cody. Thank you, CEO Ms. Faye, and the public watching us. Due to time constraint, I will not go over my presentation that I believe the board have all the packet. And at this point, if they have any questions, I'm free to answer all the questions. If not, we'll pass on to the next one due to time constraint.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Manny. Come back to myself again as planning. Again, the update for the planning is included in your packet. If you have any questions or comments, we do have some good grant news coming up, and we'll share that with you in Snapshot as well as in future board meetings. Next is Ms. Cutter.
Thank you, Mr. Massimo. A board of directors, my detailed report has been distributed in your packets. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. In respect of your time, know it's been a long day. So if not, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cutter. I'll turn it back over to you, Chairman Cody.
Thank you. All right. This time we will be going into executive session. Yes. We're gonna go into executive session to discuss and or to deliberate on periodic evaluation of rate or rating of our executive head and compensation as provided.
We haven't gone in.
We hadn't gone in yet. As provided in OCGA 50-14-3 B2. We want to get a first and a second to go into executive session. Beverly, can I get a roll call, please?
All right, Chairman. I'll do a roll call vote. Director Emerson?
Approve.
Thank you. Director Odell? Yes. Thank you. Director Stone? Yes. Thank you. Director Lockett? Yes. Thank you. Yes. Director Adams?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Director Robinson?
Would you please repeat what we're voting on?
We're voting to enter into executive session.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Director Leggett?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Taylor? Director Taylor, not present for the vote. And Chairman Cody?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Motion passed to enter into closed session.
Right.
And Dr. Robinson, I'm gonna go ahead and start the breakout room for you all to join.
Thank you.
that's why we didn't get Dr. Robinson's feedback. Dr. Robinson, can you hear us now? Chairman Cody, do you mind repeating as though we?
I can hear you now, but I wasn't hearing anything earlier.
All the way from
I can hear you now.
All right.
Start here again, I do apologize.
All right. There were no votes or action taken during our executive session. Now we're going to go into a vote on our CEO's performance evaluation. I'd like to get a first and a second.
Really, it wasn't, it was on.
It was on mute.
But it really did happen here. You maybe just want to summarize it?
Yes.
No, we're okay. We just wanted to make sure on the record that there was no votes or action taken in executive session.
All right.
And that's what the public did not hear.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. At this time, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you. Get you a copy.
Do you have it yet?
I'm about to give it to him.
We need to give Faye a copy.
Beverly.
No, I've never seen it.
Hold on. We need to give it to you.
Huh, here you go. You can get this.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
She didn't care. Whether it's one.
Good job, John.
Thank you.
I think she legitimately didn't know where she sat. I mean, I know, but it's evaluation for last year, and it's July almost. So that's all I'm. Okay, but I don't know. I mean, we got to figure something out for next year. Yeah. Yeah.